an intellectual stimulus that's hard to beat. So is it ever possible for a malicious hacker to turn their skills for good? Is there such a thing as hacker rehab? LulzSec hacker Mustafa Al-Bassam was convicted in April this year, but given a suspended sentence, and is now studying computer science at university. The computer forensics expert whose evidence helped convict him was David Day.
Nice to meet you. And you as well.
Hi.
How was your journey?
I was okay. I'm a bit weirded out.
We brought hacker and tracker together. This is the first time they've met.
So what was the most interesting thing you found on my hard drive?
I found lots of interesting things on your hard drive, but maybe some of the more interesting things I'm not sure I wanted to talk about now. I found pretty much every website you looked at. I found loads and loads of files which you probably thought had been deleted. I found them in system information folders in a place where they'd been hidden away.
So was it sort of thrilling for you to look at someone's almost life record?
Honestly, a little bit. A little bit. You can't see it, right? You can't see
He was looking for evidence that Mustafa and the anonymous hacker TFlow were one and the same. He doesn't condone anything that Mustafa did, but can't help admiring his programming skills.
I don't know whether you're even aware that you were more skilled than most at being able to do those things. So it makes me wonder what your motivation was for doing it.
Well, I suppose being a teenager at the time, one of the biggest motivations was the ability to use basic technology to embarrass major corporations and people in authority. That was sort of a thrill as a teenager. That.
In simple terms, it was just for fun, for kicks, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Sort of like solving a puzzle or problem solving. When you complete the problem at the end, you do get quite a sense of achievement.
Do you know, that's exactly the same feeling that you get when you're doing forensic work as well.
I think what was more important, for LulzSec at least, was showing the world how these major corporations weren't following basic security.
One of Mustafa's co-defendants in the LulzSec case was its PR man, Jake Davis. We last spoke to him before the case came to court.
I don't feel like a criminal. I just feel like a kid that put his creativity in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Jake spent 37 days in a youth offenders institution in Feltham in West London. Now he says the time he spent offline had a bigger impact.
I think the experience that changed me was the 2 years being banned from the internet, electronically tagged to my house. A strange combination. The 37 days in Feltham, it was interesting. It gave me some good perspective on where our youth end up when they've done what the state perceives as wrong.
He's turned away from hacking and is leading a very different life, working in film distribution.
The same kind of parts of my brain are being stimulated in the same way, but this time they won't. You know, you get paid at the end of the month instead of being sent to Feltham at the end of the month.
We're often told there's a shortage of people with skills in information security to protect corporations, the military and government computer systems from attack. The MOD is even calling for cyber reservists, a sort of geek version of the territorial army. But is anyone likely to sign up, and should former hackers bother to apply?
Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left.
At the Ministry of Defence's multi-million-pound communication centre in Corsham in Wiltshire, specialists from all three forces, Army, Navy and Air Force, work together to keep the nation's military communication systems secure. Cameras are rarely allowed in. Each screen we filmed had to be individually vetted. This is the key centre that operates and defends the UK's military networks worldwide. And it's also where some of the new Joint Reserve Unit will be based and trained. And the hope is to employ people who are not only from elsewhere within the military and defence, but also from industry and people who are not necessarily traditional military material. Lieutenant Colonel Michael White is the commanding officer of the new reserve unit. He said the kind of people they're looking for are in short supply, so they'd have to be open-minded when recruiting. So if somebody was, had a slightly quirky personality but was very good at computing, you might still consider them.
We'll look at the individuals in the round as they apply, we're looking really at the capability development rather than setting hard and fast rules about individual personal traits.
I mean, if somebody came to you, they did have a criminal record for hacking, but they had all the other skills that you were looking for, you wouldn't necessarily rule them out.
I think if they could get through that security process, then if they have that capability that we would like, then if the vetting authority was happy with that, then why not?
Simply building cyber defences is not enough. We also have to deter. Britain will build a dedicated capability to counterattack and, if necessary, to strike in cyberspace.
This was the first time that Britain's approach to cyber threats had been spelt out so clearly that we'll not only defend against attacks, but potentially launch our own. But the government may find it hard to attract the talented individuals it needs if former hacker Mustafa Al-Bassam is typical.
So if you had the opportunity to take up a role or assist in trying to prevent threats to the nation's security, would that be something that you'd be interested in using your skills for?
For me, that would be in poor taste, because I can understand the need for a government to protect itself, but when you go ahead and stomp on everyone's civil liberties, as we've seen with all the mass surveillance stories that have broken out over the past year, I think you can be rest assured that you're going to repel talented people.
The stereotypical hacker mentality, often anti-establishment, may not fit neatly into government institutions, and there's heightened sensitivity after high-profile leaks, such as those by insider Edward Snowden, the intelligence contractor who revealed details of secret mass surveillance by US and UK agencies. So taking on former malicious or black hat hackers could be seen as high risk.
If you're a black hat hacker, you obviously have some sort of ideology, some sort of inset kind of belief, and the type of people that would hire that are afraid of that because there's another Snowden situation. They don't want discrepancies in anything. So yeah, it's ironic again. It would be highly beneficial to recruit hackers, especially at a corporate level, but they're just scared to do it. So it's.
But are they right to be scared? From what you're saying, maybe they are.
Depends on the hacker.
It can be particularly difficult to get a job in industry after you've been, at least after you've been convicted of malicious hacking, which in certain situations for certain individuals is a terrible shame. If they have those abilities and those skills, some of the best talent we can't use.
Would you employ a former hacker?
That's tricky. That's very tricky. I think it would have to be every case on its merits.
You've met Mustafa today. Would you employ him?
He seems like a really nice lad, and he's obviously clearly very talented. I might.
A surprise, perhaps, that there's a growing appetite for hiring ex-hackers even within the military. But those prepared to take the risk may find it harder than they think to win over the geeks as defenders of our online security or as part of a cyber army.
Well, earlier I spoke to the Defence Secretary, Philip Hammond. I asked him whether the armed services would employ someone who had a criminal conviction for hacking.
Well, as a matter of policy, the armed forces don't necessarily exclude people who have criminal convictions. Each individual case would be looked at on its merits. The conviction would be examined in terms of how long ago it was, how serious it was, what sort of sentence had followed. So I can't rule it out.
But in the cyber world, of course, is there any way of being certain that someone's gone from a so-called black hat hacker to a white hat hacker?
Well, I should probably add that there are many professional people out there who will have the skills that you might traditionally associate with the hacker's skill set, who have never done anything illegal and who scrupulously maintain their activities on the right side of the law. So this will be a matter of judgment in individual cases, but the armed forces overall do not have an absolute bar on people with criminal convictions becoming members of them.
Would a hacker recruited to your cybersecurity force have to wear a uniform and pass standards of physical fitness?
Well, the cyber reserve that we're recruiting will have considerable flexibility in terms of recruitment criteria around areas like fitness. Clearly, it's not necessary for somebody who is going to spend their serving time doing cyber work, not necessarily necessary for them to have the same level of fitness as someone who was joining a Royal Marine or an infantry reserve unit to do. So we will have flexibility. I mean, the routine would be that they would wear uniform, but again, service personnel, when they're doing performing roles that are not in public and don't necessarily need the wearing of uniform, they may not always do so.
Would they have to have a haircut?
Well, the regulations around the reserves will still apply, but there will be some flexibility where we're talking about members of the Cyber Reserve. Look, Jeremy, it's very simple here. What we're trying to do is recruit the very brightest and the best from across the IT industry and use the skill sets that they have got in the national interest to enhance our cyber defences and to help us build an offensive cyber capability.
Right. Can you tell us what a cyber attack is, please?
Well, there are two types, primarily two types of cyber attack. There are cyber attacks seeking to take information from the victim systems, and there are cyber attacks seeking to deny service to the victim systems, shut them down, essentially.
The United States has identified China as the source of the greatest threat at a government level. Who's our enemy?
Well, it's not about a specific enemy, it's about being aware that both our traditional perceived potential adversaries and also some non-traditional smaller states do have this capability. There are a number of countries around the world who have recognized that this is an asymmetric capability. It's an area where by building a niche capability, a relatively small country could have a disproportionate effect that they could never hope to do by building up traditional, conventional military forces.
Can you tell us what these countries are?
Well, I'm not going to name the individual countries.
Well, how many are there?
Well, there are a number of major players around the world who are already known to have cyber capabilities. There are other smaller countries who are known to be seeking to develop them.
What would a British cyber attack be like?
Well, look, I should start by emphasising that this is very nascent, early emerging technology. But it is possible that in time there will be capabilities to interfere with an enemy's ability to control its weapon systems. So you might be able to deny an enemy the use of certain weapon systems. You might be able to interfere with the way they worked. You might be able to do, by cyber intervention, something that today would be done by a kinetic strike, by bombing or missile attacks.
Would such an attack have to be authorised by the Prime Minister?
Well, we're very clear that the law of armed conflict applies to the cyber domain. There is an interesting debate going on internationally at the moment, and quite openly, about how the law of armed conflict should properly be applied in the cyber domain. But we're very clear that any cyber activities will have to be lawful, and they will have to meet the same standards as we require for conventional attacks. That is to say, they would have to be proportionate to the threat that we were dealing with or the attack that we had suffered.
Philip Hammond, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, another energy